the Prop 13 does limit 2% cap annually, right? So county assessor's office cannot assess you more than 2%. So in other words, the person that bought the property in 1990 for $200,000 and now sitting on a property worth, let's say, $1 million, he's not paying. Welcome to Bay Area Home Hustle Podcast. I'm your host, Parm Rahi, and I'm with my co-host, Mike Brown.
Hi, guys.
And today we're going to discuss rather a very special topic, which is property taxes.
Yes. Did you know not all property taxes are the same in different states?
Right.
You know, in the state of Arizona, they only pay 0.56% of your property.
But they do pay other taxes.
Yes. Okay, so they nail you anyway, maybe through sales tax or maybe even through income tax.
That's true.
And that's going to be a big nail. Maybe even your tolls.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about property taxes because it is a big topic when you're purchasing a home, right? But let's talk about the basics of property taxes first, how it relates in California, and what you can expect in Contra Costa and Alameda County. So property tax is what? It's 1% of the purchase price.
Right.
Just remember that.
That's the base one.
That's base, right? And additionally, on top of that, each community and cities and counties will have other taxes that will be imposed on top. So it can vary from anywhere from 1% to about 1.3.
1.1 to 1.3 for Contra Costa Alameda.
Right. And it can even go higher than that too in new development and so forth. Right. Before we jump into that, let's go ahead and talk about Prop 13. You wanna start with that?
Yeah, so Prop 13 came about when different cities or different counties had different tax rates.
Right.
So, it's almost like a rebellion. So certain cities and counties saying, hey, we pay too much.
Right.
So I believe 1978, Jarvis-Gann, Prop 13, came about and just say, okay, we're going to standardize and just make it 1% base.
Yep.
And every other county will have adjustments.
That's right. So yeah, prior to 1978, it was a wild west, wild west in California, where taxes were collected differently in each county. So that sort of set the tone for 1% base tax all across California, which was probably the greatest thing. And that kind of levied some stress off the homeowners too. And then you can go about and move and purchase properties in different areas and not worry about taxes, right? Because that sort of, I think it limited people too in a way, right? Because folks back in the days looked at it like, okay, I'm going to move to this county, but I got to pay higher taxes. Right, so I shouldn't make that purchase, right? I mean, that I'm sure back of the head you do, and you kind of do realize that part too.
Right, and you know what? And there are two things that came out of Prop 13. Okay, it most probably put Ronald Reagan into the White House because he was California's governor, and at the same time, it really made housing more affordable.
It did, no, absolutely, it did, and then the other thing that came out of Prop 13 was the Melrose, right?
Yeah.
So Prop 13, obviously we spoke with that 1978 when that established, it was set a base tax rate, right? But remember, California was growing in the 80s.
Yeah, a lot of construction
was happening, right? So cities and counties, came into a problem like, okay, if the base tax is 1% when somebody's purchasing, how do we fund new communities and so forth? What do we do? So these two senators basically came together, which is Henry Mello and Mike Roos, and they created this act called the Melrose Community Facilities Act in 1982.
Yep.
Which allowed, what does it allow, Mike?
Okay, so what is Melrose? Melrose is actually an supplemental, an additional tax.
It's additional tax, not supplemental.
Not supplemental, additional tax.
That's right.
And that tax help fund the infrastructure of that district with new construction, okay?
Right.
So in other words, if we were going to have a new construction in, say, Dublin, right, which is happening a lot now, there's a lot of building in Dublin, right? So the builder who's building a new homes out there,
new community development,
they will actually have an additional tax called the Melrose tax.
Right.
Okay. And what does that do? It actually helps fund the new police out there, new schools out there, because you're actually building a new community, right?
Yeah.
And parks and fire department.
Roads.
All the essentials that you need in a
Yep.
new community.
Yep, roads and things like that as well too. Yeah, anything that is needed for a community to function independently, right? That's what Melrose basically did, and like you said, it varies, right? Um, like Melrose up in like I know in Tracy Hills, right? They call it Tracy Hills up on Highway 5 right now. They're building on both sides of the highway, left and right, and they have a special assessment of Melrose up there, and it's pretty high. It's kind of high. It's almost like 1.7% with your base tax.
Right. Now that being said, Melrose has a shelf life.
It does.
Okay. You're not going to be paying it forever, right?
Yeah.
So when the community starts getting more saturated and developed, right, and they're most of the homes are already all moved in and everything, people paying their taxes. Usually it lasts only for about 20-25 years.
Right. So what it is, let's talk about that too for a second. It basically it is that particular county or city will get a bond. Essentially, that's what it is. It's a bond that they purchase for 20-25 years. So they get the money and it's a bond that they pass, and that basically essentially what you're doing is you're paying down that bond with the Melrose tax. Right. That's what it is in terms of shelf life.
And to add, so Melrose cities or communities, everything's newer, right? They have newer amenities, and because they actually have lower crime rate. I mean, it's just stats out there.
Yeah, of course, right? So how does it impact you? Okay, if you're a first-time home buyers, right? What you need to calculate is, in addition to obviously your purchase and your payment for your principal and interest, right? You have to also consider property taxes. Remember, anywhere from 1% to all the way to 1.7% in some counties, right? Like when you're purchasing a property, sometimes you read the disclosures, look at the homeowners disclosures, and they'll say something like they purchased the property back in like, I don't know, 1990 or something, and their tax rate is $2,000, or maybe now it could be $3,000 or something. That's because their tax rate was based on the purchase price of when
they first bought it.
When they first bought it, right? And I think one of the other things we forgot to mention is the Prop 13 does limit 2% cap annually, right? So county assessor's office cannot assess you more than 2%. So in other words, the person that bought the property in 1990 for $200,000 and now sitting on a property worth, let's say, $1 million, he's not paying property tax on a based on $1 million. He's paying $2,000, and then it's increasing 2% each year, right? Because he hasn't sold the property; it's a primary residence and so forth, right? So remember that too, that it does cap at 2%.
Primary residence is the catchphrase.
Right. So going back to the buyer's example, so if you are a buyer right now, you have to, the property tax that they're disclosing to you from the seller side and the disclosures, that's not what you're going to pay on. You're going to pay tax on the purchase price. So if you purchase a property for $800,000, your tax bill is going to be, your base rate is going to be 1% plus any plus any other taxes that county or city or new development might have. Okay. Right. So $8,000 to $10,000. So typically what you want to do is you want to at least have 1.2% of the purchase price, unless
put aside,
or have it in the back of your head, like that's what you have to pay for every year as well too. Okay. Right. And that's in addition to homeowners insurance, your principal payment on your interest and anything else that goes with it.
Well, that is for a conventional loan.
Yeah, right. So this is a good example. Yeah. Very good example. Okay. So if you're purchasing a home, let's say conventional, which is typically 20% or more,
right?
You're not going to have like impound account. I mean, there'll be an option. You can create an impound account. An impound account is essentially where you make one monthly payment that covers your principal, your interest, your property taxes, and your homeowner's insurance.
Right.
It pays for all that, and they're responsible for sending all those bills out to the various entities and stuff. So you make one payment. But sometimes you have an FHA loan.
Right. Well, because you cannot do that 20% down, then you'll be maybe even instead of just the 3%, you may want to do 10 to 15%, but not the 20% down. Then you really don't have a choice.
Right. You have an impound account.
Yeah.
You have an impound account. An impound account will, you will have to pay into that too. So remember that too. What's the other catch? There's another catch here too. when you're buying a property, and this is one that we mentioned a second ago, which is a supplemental tax bill. Don't forget that too, right? So let's use example. You're buying a property for $800,000 from a seller, right? That
who
seller
has owned it for a long time.
who has owned it for a long time.
Right,
Let's say they
right.
bought it, 15, 20 years ago,
Right.
right? That seller obviously is paying a very low tax rate based on his base rate and plus the 2% increases over the years, right? Let's assume he's paying $4,000, but you bought the property for $800,000. So your base rate is going to be 1.2% of that or more. Let's say you're going to pay $10,000 going forth, right? But in the transaction itself, you're not going to make that adjustment right away, right? The counties have to do this. So the escrow is only going to collect the prorated taxes that when you take possession, when the contract was written and when you take possession,
Right.
and credit that towards the seller, nothing else. What you're going to get is after you close escrow and you get your keys and you move into your home, you're going to get a one-time special assessment, right? Which is essentially a tax bill from the county that will assess you on the difference between
Right.
what the homeowners bought the property for and what they sold the property for. And that's going to be your responsibility.
Right. So it's called the supplemental tax and tax bill, and it's to tax you on the difference. Okay. Give the county about a month, 5 weeks
Yeah.
before they send you
take
the bill.
longer.
And they'll say supplemental bill.
Sometimes it takes
Yeah.
even longer. So yeah, I mean, I would on a side, I would keep in the Bay Area here in Contra Costa County. I mean, if you're buying an $800,000 property, most likely somebody bought it for $200,000, right? So you're looking at least the other 500 grand
Yeah.
on top. So
Yeah.
I would kind of keep somewhere from about $5,000 to $6,000 on the side for that particular bill because it will come and you will have to pay for it.
Yeah.
So now let's get into the other side of this and talk about sellers. What can sellers do? What their tax rate's going to be, and so forth. Right? Let's talk about something specific, which is Prop 19.
Oh,
Right?
okay.
Prop 19 that passed, right? So Prop 13 was set the base rate. Melrose came in and said, okay, we got to build new communities because the population in California is growing. How do we make roads and new communities and schools and so forth? So they came up with the Melrose Act, which did that, right? But what is the benefit for homeowners, right? Especially the aging ones that want to move away in California. So along with California, 11 other states, I think total 11 states have something similar to Prop 19, which is that if you're 55 years or older and you are moving within the same state, you get to carry your base rate with you.
Wow.
Right? So let's use example. Let's say you're 55 years older. You bought your property in the 90s, okay, early 90s or something. You bought it for, let's say you bought it for $200,000. Today, you're selling that property for $800,000. Okay, your tax rate was, let's say it was $2,000 at the time, and over the years, I'm not doing the math right now, but let's say you're paying let's say $4,000 now, right? That's your tax that you're paying annually, $4,000. But you're selling the property for $800,000. Okay, you sold it. Now you're going to go out and buy a property. Well, let's say you buy the property for $900,000. So what you're going to pay tax on is it's going to be your base rate, which is the purchase when you purchased the original property, which was $200,000,
right?
Plus the difference between the new purchase and your sale price, the subject property that you sold. So what I'm saying is, so it's $900,000,
right?
Minus the 800, that's $100,000, plus the 200 that you had at the time when you bought the original property.
Right.
So your new base rate is going to be calculated on $300,000.
That's really good.
So it is good if you buy the property less than what you sold it for. Let's say you sold your property for $800,000 and you bought let's say a condo, you downsized somewhere else in California and bought it for $600,000. Then your base rate is just based on the $200,000 original purchase you made in the 1990s.
So actually, it's good for people who plan to downsize.
Absolutely, it is. It's a good too. This was a recent prop that passed.
Oh wow!
This was I think it was in 2021, I believe.
And thank you. I learned something today.
Yeah, it's actually a good one. This is something that we tell our sellers too. Like if you're moving within California, you get to carry your base rate with you, which is
really
amazing.
Good, right?
Especially if you're selling your property for let's say $800,000, you're staying under that. and you're moving somewhere in California because you're downsizing, then your base rate, your tax rate's not changing.
That's
You
really
you
good.
carry with you. What you do have to do is at the time of the sale, you do have to fill out a form,
Oh,
and you have up to 2 years to claim that. Okay,
oh, of
don't forget
course.
that too.
Right.
And the other thing is you have 2 years to claim it, and you have to live in the property, and you can do it 3 times in your lifetime.
Oh, that's really
So
good.
there's a cap on it as well too.
3 times. So in other words,
Yeah.
if I want to change homes every 2 years, I can do that.
No, you can't. And one thing I want to mention is like sometimes your kids will inherit properties and so forth.
Mm.
It does not pass to them, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, it's actually it's more.
Oh
it's,
no, actually no, I take that back. I'm so sorry. It does inherit to them if they plan on living in the
yeah,
property.
of course. That's what we want people to do.
That's what you
Live in
want.
their homes.
But if they don't live in it and they try to rent the property out, then they get reassessed for the whole value.
So the kids will have the same tax rate as the parents if they move
If
in
they
and live
inherit,
there.
if
in
they live in
Emilyville.
there.
Wow.
Exactly.
So actually, it's more made for older folks who want to downsize.
It
right?
is, and that's what it is. The incentive is to keep the population within the same state,
that's
right?
fine.
Not
You
let
should-
them move
yeah.
out. But again, if you move out of state, this does not apply. Then you get recessed on
Right.
to the subject state that you're
Oh,
moving into.
very
and so
interesting.
forth. Yeah, it's a good. I think it's a great tool. I mean, taxes are only going up. Home insurance is only going up in California.
Yeah.
Our rates are pretty high at this point too. So yeah, I mean, it's become home ownership is pretty tough, especially for first time home buyers. I mean,
Yeah.
we know that
Yeah.
it's getting tougher and tougher. Obviously, we talked about this many times before. You have to have a
Always.
strategy. You got to have a plan. If you have the down payment, if you can comfortably afford the monthly payment, then obviously this is something you want to do.
Jump in.
Then you need to
Because,
jump in, right? Because there is plenty of inventory out there now.
Still is.
You can negotiate, you can buy down rates,
Yeah.
but you have to have a strategy in place. You can't just. No one really wakes up in the morning and says, "I'm going to buy a house today," right? I mean, unless you're a millionaire or something, and you can
No,
say,
but still, I mean,
no one really says, "I'm going to go buy a house."
right,
today,
right, right. Because they have to go
You
through a whole
plan it.
process.
Yeah. So I would say like these are the things you want to discuss with your real estate agent, right? Your real estate agent should be, if not knowledgeable in the area, it should be able to direct you to someone who is and give you
Right.
a better picture of it.
Right.
Remember, we are not CPAs, so please consult your CPA. Check with your county assessor's office,
Especially on the tax
especially in the tax
parts.
line, and see what they have to say. But that's what I have.
That's fine. I mean, I will catch you guys next time then.
Thank you for watching. See you guys later.
Cheers.